Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to Generational Growth Investing. Today, we're going to go over the dividend portfolio. As usual, I'll summarize what happened in June, any changes to the portfolio, and where we're at in July so far, and where we're at in the year. Kind of do some projections forward. To start, I'm going to go over sort of a investing topic, and just to start off, this is not financial advice. The goal of this channel is just to show what a dividend portfolio can look like. I basically just track what funds I'm holding, generally how they're doing, and tracking the dividends as they're coming in. Talk about risk a little bit and potential changes to the portfolio over time, total returns, etc. But as usual, I'm going to go over a little bit of an investing story. This video came up recently. It has like 3 million views, and it's a story. The title is Alone, Broke, and Over 60. I sold everything to start over. This man talks about starting over, but he talks about later in life only having he talks about he has $1,100 to live on. I think that might be Social Security. Forget if he says exactly, but the video is on this Offended Outcast channel that's pretty big, but I guess this particular video went kind of viral, and he talks about the difficulties with money at 60, what it was like to have to kind of start over, and interestingly, he talks about starting out having to pay all these debts. And although I don't really talk about debt a lot on this channel, part of the goal is to have more assets that are building wealth, and we really shouldn't be also building debts. And there's a couple different things we can do with the dividend income. This can be money to live off of. This can be a compounding snowball for retirement. And depending on how quickly we can grow it, it could be both things. So there's a couple different strategies that we can employ with it. But as I've gone over before, the kind of idea of the extra money that I have, and maybe the extra money you have, the idea is to be buying assets that make you money. I want to be buying assets to build passive income instead of purchasing things that are debts or purchasing things that cost me money. I don't want to end up in this position where I'm 60, I'm broke, I have $1,000 type of Social Security check, and that's all I have to live off of. You can obviously watch this video, but in some ways, this guy ends up talking about how he had to kind of leave everything and go take care of this homestead, and it was very isolating. And I watched this other video recently where somebody was really talking about how besides everything else, I mean, we don't want to make money number one, and the whole idea of, does money buy happiness? But it definitely buys options, and it can give you options later in life. It can, whether you're doing a traditional portfolio or a dividend portfolio, things might come up. And, the thing with the dividend portfolio, even though I could stop the drip, which is the drip just means, if you're new to this, it's when you have the dividends in the portfolio buy back in. They continually automatically buy shares of the fund. So these are the different funds that I'm holding, and so when a dividend comes, it just immediately goes back in and buys the fund to create this compounding, this snowball effect. Um, I can turn off the drip. Like in May, we totaled $745. That just bought back in, but for some reason, if I wanted that 745 to pay for some expense, I can turn off the drip and then put that right in my checking account. There's some new things that I learned that I'll mostly save for another video that have to do with ways to save on taxes and things like that. Um, but not ending up 60 and broke. Um, I did have questions about. Uh, Obviously, there can be unknown expenses, right? But there's some examples we can go through where even just the earlier you start, even just saving $100 a week or $100 a month and just putting it towards this type of thing, the sooner you start, the sooner the snowball begins to work and work and work. So that's it for most of the philosophy of where do I want to end up, and do I want to just depend on Social Security or something like that, or do I want to spend my money so that I can have passive income over time? That is kind of the goal. So, anyways, so the total for June came in at $843, and I'm going to talk about some changes. And the second half of the video, we'll go into some more nerdy stuff that I need to do to update some of these numbers. But uh, either way, we totaled $843 for the month of June, which was awesome. And that brings our the total for the year up to June, which is so halfway through the year, 3,362. We can pull up our calculator here and we can even just average, but let's say, so if we want to project the next year, I can do 843 if we did nothing else times 12 months, and the the next 12 months we should bring in a total of 10 grand, which is pretty good. We can also do things like divided by 365 to see what are we making per day, which is pretty cool. I do like to look at, so what is this actually bringing in per day, and I can do times 7 and say also, this is bringing in $194 a week. Lots of different ways I can look at, where I stand on this right now, which is pretty motivating to kind of look at it, by day, by month, by week. So then, today is July 6th, and Robinhood does a little bit of projection. So it'll say these dividends are coming in. So not all of these have hit the account yet, but they will in the next couple days. So I just put them on the spreadsheet here. Move this over a tiny bit. Anyway, so far for the month of July, we have $347, and I've got, these, the goal of this is just to sort of do like what I call like a quick and dirty overview of what's going on. You can do more complicated spreadsheets, that's for sure, but I don't want to overcomplicate things. So I can see on the left, this is the income per month, and then I restarted it in January. Or excuse me, this is the total for the year. So we started April of last year, and it grew and grew and grew till December. And December, the total was 1,500. So we've already doubled that by halfway through the year, and so we can see this is growing up and to the right, which is what we want. And then the graph on the right here is the income per month. So we can see this is mostly going up and to the right. We had a couple anomalies last year, some high paying funds, but they were like losing value because they're risky. So we moved out of those to some less risky types of funds. And June was our biggest month. There is going to be a change that I'm going to go over, but overall, up and to the right. And right now, I mean, even if we want to be conservative, we could say, we're averaging $800 a month, which is pretty cool. So, um, going into, so I also look at the performance. So this is not dated, but usually when I make a video, I put in the returns for that day. And I don't have SCHD or SPHD anymore. I can probably delete those, but for now they're just zero. So I can kind of see if there's any trends. Um, like JEPQ, the total returns. This is like for the fund itself. Uh, Last video is up to 7%. It's dipped down a tiny bit. These are kind of like just holding steady, holding flat. They go up and down a little bit. Um, we have a couple like J triple B, J triple A, and clause, which are supposed to be like highly defensive positions. The annual yield in this column is a little bit less, but they should basically just like hold steady. Um, and it's interesting to see like how the funds do compared to like the overall market, which I'll touch on a little bit as well. Um, and anyways, IWMI is trending up and to the right. Um, ASGI dipped last month, but it's back up to negative 1.53%, so heading in a good direction. CLM is back to about zero. XPAY is doing good, holding steady. Our two riskiest positions are SPYT and XPAY, and the annual yield has changed, so that's what I'm going to go over. But if you're just here for looking at the trend of the overall portfolio, and I've said this before, one of the reasons that I wanted to try this was I thought, well, if one of the ideas is to, in investing, is to build a regular growth investment portfolio, and then at a certain point in time later in life, switch it over to a dividend type of account. Well, I would be kind of nervous doing that if I didn't have some experience with how things went, what how diverse should the account be, what's the real like income that can be generated. So doing this now is going to give me confidence if I move other portfolio positions into dividend types of accounts later on. Like knowing which funds are more stable, what types of swings you can actually get, how low do these go sometimes, stuff like that. And these like positions that are supposed to be more defensive, how much do they really change over time? There's a graph here which just shows trends on these as well. So it's a little easier to see how they're doing. The other thing that I have down here, and I'm not gonna update this in this video, but these are the annual yields of all these different funds. And I have some new funds I haven't added yet, but I've been doing some research on other funds that pay anywhere from the 10% to 15% annual yield. And I want to try to continue to diversify a little bit more. I haven't added those yet, but I've been doing some research. If you have any ideas of funds that are kind of in the income generating dividend category, leave a comment, let me know, I'll take a look at them. uh, what I'm doing down here because SPYT is my riskiest position. I'm actually tracking all the dividends since I've held it. Again, just kind of a quick and dirty look at it. So right now, the return on SPYT has been negative 269, but the total dividends so far that I've gotten for this are just over $1,000. So the final with the dividends then minus the return is 763, and so I know I'm still ahead if I can kind of calculate. So SPYT is down 2.85% today, and I can see it would, what would it have to drop? I need to watch this one because so this would have to drop down to like negative 8% or so, and that would wipe this out, and I would basically be break even. The other thing with, I mean, almost kind of going back to this type of video, alone broke and at 60. So I want to develop income so it's something that I could live off of. However, I still have positions in all of these that I could also sell if I needed to. So to me, it's like, well, I have the income coming from these, and then I also have like the asset or the principal that I could also sell if there was a need to. So that's that. And then this is the annual yield, but we're going to look at those because I don't update these that often. And what I did before was I took the weighting of each of these in the portfolio and I averaged them. So the average yield amongst all of these, the average yield for the whole portfolio together is about 13 and some percent. That's annual yield. However, this is going to change because there are some changes specifically. So good things don't last forever, and SPYT and XPAY seem to have cut their dividend, and that could change some things for where I'm making new buys. But I've seen some changes happen before. Hopefully, it'll go back up. There's definitely reasons for all this kind of more detail that's beyond the scope of just these portfolio updates, so we can look at why these were cut, but I'm not going to do that in this video. So that's where we're at today. With the cuts, which I'll go over, um, our income might go down. I don't think it's going to go down by a huge amount, but the question is going to be, will we match or meet the income we had in June? So $843, because the annual yield went down on our two biggest payers. Um, will our monthly income even get to 800 for the month of July? I don't know yet. It's to be seen. And yeah, subscribe or pay attention if you want to see what happens with that. But I do expect, like, this is the SPYT is $152. But next month, I don't know if it's going to be, it could go down. So we'll see what happens with that. So the next thing to do, so that's kind of the first half of the video. Stick around if you want to see. I'm going to look up the new annual yields of all of these for the video. And then the next video, they will be updated. But one other thing I'm going to do actually before that is I'm opening Robinhood right now. And so there's a question with dividends is, are you leaving money on the table? Because let's see, if I go to Yahoo Finance, I should be able to look at, see, this is S&P futures. What I want to do is see if I can I do like Okay, so this should be the S&P 500. So if I do, no, this is like derivatives. I'm not sure. What is this saying? 900%. That does not seem right. Okay, this should just be the S&P. This should just follow the S&P. So year to date, so I want to compare what my portfolio is doing to just holding the regular market. So year to date, the S&P 500 is up 10.17%. But if I do year to date in my portfolio, and there has been a little bit of buys and sells I've done, but right now it's up only 8.3%. So it looks like I'm leaving 2% on the table compared to just holding and buying the S&P 500. However, the way Robinhood, there's like different ways to calculate things, and so Robinhood says I'm only up 8.29%. However, it's not taking in account the annual yield. The buys do affect the return, but it's not calculated as if these are gains. So the thing is, if the S&P is up 10% year to date, but my portfolio is up 8.2% year to date, we're halfway through the year. So if my average return is 13%, then I can take half of that because we've gone through half the year. So I can, conservatively add 6%. So that means my portfolio is up more like 14% for the year compared to the S&P 500. So far as I've been doing this basically as an experiment, um, it looks like I'm beating the S&P 500 by about 4%. Um, if I do the 1 year, which I haven't been doing this portfolio even long enough for that to matter, but the year to date I can calculate, and I think I am beating this a little bit. Um, so, look, when you're investing, there's always going to be things that do better than what you're currently doing, even if you're buying individual stocks. The difference is, as I always think, your investing strategy should match kind of the risk that you're comfortable with and the amount of time you can put into it, stuff like that. So, anyways, that's the S&P 500. And next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and update these annual yields. Some of them may have gone up and some may have gone down. But I know these two have gone down, so I'm going to update that now. I don't know why these may have had dividend cuts, but I haven't looked at the other ones. So SPYT should be here. And yeah, instead of 20%, it's 12.62. And then there's the expense ratio. So I kind of, these are averages, so I do kind of just average things out. But we can do 12.7% for SPYT. So that's a huge drop for SPYT on the annual yield. Hoping it goes back up, but this was the riskiest position. And then XPAY as well. So I guess I don't have ready here. Okay, here's XPAY. So yeah, I can look at year to date on XPAY, which mine is doing a little better than that. But the yield for XPAY minus the expense ratio is also about the same. 7.6%. So huge drop on my biggest dividend positions. So the next one is JEPQ. So this is NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ has done better than the S&P 500. So that's probably why JEPQ has been up higher than the S&P funds. Anyways, this says the yield is 10.11 minus the expense ratio, so let's do 9.8. So this has gone down a little. So if all of these drop, and they drop enough, then the monthly dividend total should go down. SPYI. And I've looked at some other dividend channels, and some of them do say, pay attention to this kind of stuff. Like, you don't want to hold on to something that you think is paying you more than you think. This says 7.28 minus the expense ratio. We'll just call it 7.7 SPYI. So a lot has changed in the market. So this is saying this is 7.7 annual yield, which is another pretty big drop. QQQI. So this says 10.28. We'll call this 9.5. Yeah, this has dropped a lot. So we'll see where we end up, and I'm not going to do this on this video, but we'll have a new weighted average, which should be a lot less. GPIC. And I haven't looked at these. All I know is the big ones I did look at and they dropped, so I wanted to do this for this video. So this says 14.93 minus the expense ratio, so we'll call it 14.6. So this actually went up quite a bit. So this is 14.6 annual yield right now, so that's pretty cool that this went up so much. JEPI. And I don't update this for every video, so JEPI, this says the annual yield is 8.45 minus 0.35, so 8.1 for JEPI. This went up a tiny bit. That's cool. We don't have these funds anymore. JAAA. Curious what this is going to be. So yield is 5.43 minus 0.2, so 5.23. This went down a little bit. We did SPYT, JBBB. This should be over 5. So this has actually gone up quite significantly. So that's pretty cool, and that's good because, like, I'll show you these particular ones, these CLOs should be very defensive. So, like, if I look at the year to date on this, I went over these in some of the earlier videos, but they shouldn't really change very much over time. And it looks like they have these big dips and stuff, but if I look at the numbers, they're really changing by fractions of a dollar. All around the 47 range. So they shouldn't change very much. But either way, so this is actually 7.34% minus the expense ratio, so we'll call it 6.9. Okay, so this did go down. We have clause. Again, another defensive one, 7.46. We'll also call this 6.9. So this went down a little bit. IWMI. So this says it's up 9% year to date. This looks really healthy. So year to date. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to pull up another tab. And thing with this IWMI, it doesn't have the yearly return or the yield on Yahoo Finance. So I'm going to look this up on another window. So I'm just looking up IWMI annual yield. And maybe there's another website. So I'm actually just looking at the Neos Funds website for this one, which is good. So this says 14.42%. I assume this is, up to date. But then it also has the management fee. So anyways, let's call it minus this 13.7. Oh, look, this is basically the same. So this is still 13.7. I'll just leave that. CSWC is Capital Southwest. Let's look at the year to date, 7.36%. And then the annual yield, this says 10.79%. Don't know why there's two numbers here. I think that's what I used was 10.79. So this looks like it went down a little bit. ASGI, year to date, this is pretty much flat. Is that pretty much what I have? Yes. And this one says 11.22%, which is down a tiny bit. So most things are down. And then CLM is this one. And this one's still, CLM's now the biggest annual yield, 19.47. Just still down a little bit, but okay, great. So these are the new annual yields. Looks like most things went down a little bit, and I think we said GPIC went up, so 14.6% is pretty good, but I don't think it makes up for the other ones that went down, and obviously SPYT and XPAY going down a lot is pretty big. However, I'll have to look into some more things, but I'm hoping that the fact that the dividend went down maybe means that the principal will be going up. Not sure if that's the case, but our overall numbers are less. So this says, let's see, how many do we have? So there's 14 funds. This is telling me the sum is 149. So if I do 149 divided by 14, oops. So this is giving an average of 10.6%, but this is not weighted. So the weightings really matter. For example, JBBB, clause, JAAA are lowest weight in the portfolio. I haven't updated the weights. Um, so I think I could probably safely say that the annual return is at least 11%. It might be higher, but why does that matter? Because my favorite thing to do is then to come over here to this compound interest calculator. If you just Google compound interest calculator, one of the first ones, it will be from investor.gov. And yeah, if we don't want to end up like this guy, alone, broke, and at 60, we can take a look at where we're at. We can do things like, say, our initial investment, depending on your age and things like that. Let's say you have 40K saved up, and our monthly contribution is $500. Let's do 30 years. I just think that even though this calculator doesn't take into account, there's some calculators that have more things like taxes and stuff like that. But if I just want to see in general, where I could be, or am I going in the right direction, I can do this. So let's say monthly contribution is $500 a month. Our interest rate is 11%. And we can do a variance. I like to do 1%. And then our compound frequency is monthly, because most of these are monthly payers. And then hit calculate. So this says, with all of this, if I were starting with 40K and I did $500 a month, in 30 years, I'd have 2.4 million. And if I click show table, make this a little bigger here, I can kind of see where I'll be at in 10 years. 228,000 in 20 years, 700,000, almost 800,000, which is pretty good. And I'd like to see how many years is it going to take to hit $1 million. So this is at the 11% return. So based on your age and things like that, or if you have money to move over, let's say you're older and you already have 250K, and let's say you're not adding anything, we'll put $1 a month. If I hit calculate, I can also see if I'm not adding anything, I can kind of see what would the income be between different years. So once I'm up to $1 million, then the income is about 100 grand between years. So that's why I want to hit $1 million, so that the income is actually 100K. And I mean, even if we think the average return of the overall market is 11%, this still is valid. Let's say I'm starting earlier with $1,000, but I'm putting in $800 a month. At the same 11% return, if I do calculate, I can see, okay, so it's still going to take me 23 years to hit that $1 million. So, yeah, if you're 20 years old and you start doing $800 a month and you're starting with $1,000, you're looking at, if you're 20 years old, when you're 43, you'll hit $1 million. And if you keep that rolling, when you're 50, you'll hit 2 million. Um, However, so this also gives me a reason to say I'm deciding like how much should I contribute per month. Maybe this is the difference between another subscription or deciding should I buy a used car or should I, get a loan for a vehicle. These types of different things. I can look at, well, what would it be instead if I bought a used car versus getting that car loan or different decisions like that. Maybe I want to do $1,000 a month. And what's the difference? How much sooner will I hit certain milestones? Maybe this is buying a house or early retirement, things like that. Um, let's do one more. Let's say instead we're still going to save or we're still going to invest $1,000 a month, but we'll start with $10,000. Maybe you're not starting like from very little. And hit calculate. So in this case, yeah, it's going to be 21 years before we hit $1 million. So easy to just try different numbers. I saw an example recently where someone started at 18 and they did $300 a month. So let's start with $1,000, $300 a month. And if you're starting at 18, let's even add another 5 years and see where we end up after 35 years. So that would put you at like 58 years old or something. So the interesting thing about this to me, so this one saying 35 years is 1.5 million, or we hit $1 million at 32 years, which would put you exactly at 50 years old. The interesting thing about this, as far as like lifestyle changes and stuff, so we're saying if you're 18 and you started doing $300 a month, where would this get you? And the interesting thing to me is, this is saying over 35 years, I'm not even going to increase my monthly contribution whatsoever. So we're assuming career changes, job changes. I'm hoping that my salary goes up over time. If I'm starting at 18, then add 10 years, hopefully at 28 years old, I have more money to work with. But to me, this is saying no matter what, even if I make more money, my salary goes up, even if I kept this for 35 years at $300 a month, to me, this is saying I'm still going to be able to comfortably retire. And even before I'm 60, I'll have $1.5 million. This is saying I could retire like at 50. But I think I'm hoping for a lot of people that over the years they could start to increase this. And let's say by 28, you can double it and you can start to do $600 a month. So this is saying at 28, I'd have 68K. So let's put 68K in here and do calculate. So this is saying even if I did $300 a month for 10 years, and then at year 10, I changed it to $600 a month when I hit that 68K mark. Instead of retiring with 1.5 million, so we'd have to minus off 10 years and put it at 25. We added $500,000. Or we could say, we hit $1 million a few years earlier, like almost 5 years earlier. So my current plan is to do as much as I can. I don't know exactly how much I'm doing, but I'm not 18, so I have to calculate this with a little bit different. If I put my length in time to retirement down to 20 years, what, this tells me, what do I really need to be um, investing to retire with $1 million? And that's what we're shooting for. And really, you know, the idea is going back to our chart here. By the time I hit $1 million, this should be, instead of $800 a month, it should be $8,000 a month, which might even be more than I need. We know there's inflation and things like that, but um, if you don't already know, if we can assume that our interest rate is 11%, we can basically take this number and divide it by 10, and that should give us our yearly. And then if we divide it by 10 again, it should give us our monthly income. So the way I see this is basically like once the portfolio reaches $500,000, that should be close to $5,000 a month. So the sooner I get to $500,000, I'm looking at $5,000 a month. Portfolio is $600,000, that should be close to $6,000 a month, and so on. So, you know, the number that we're aiming for, I like to look at it as monthly. Let's say I decide, well, I can live off of $6,000 a month. Really in that case, my target might only be $600,000. Then I could turn off the dividend reinvestment, and then I have $6,000 a month hitting my bank account. Who knows? Maybe that's enough for me, and I can just live off of that. I think there's plenty of people that could. So, longer video than average, but I wanted to go through this compound interest calculator. Again, just a quick and dirty way to look at this. Definitely needed to update the annual yields because these do change a little bit over time, and I'll be recalculating this weighted average, and we'll see you later in the month and see, it's going to be close. I don't know if we'll hit $800 this month, but, just like other investing, there are going to be ups and downs with all of it. So, anyways, thanks for watching, and yeah, let me know if there's some other funds besides the ones I already have that I should take a look at, and I will.